This is the Ag Queen Podcast. This podcast explores the agriculture industry with the movers and shakers of those shaping it. Here's your host, Lori Boyer.
Today we'll be talking about sustainable aviation fuel, which is jet fuel that is made from renewable products such as corn, soybeans, and sorghum. And from the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Coalition, I am joined by Tom Michaels. He is a Director of Government Affairs for United Airlines. And Allison Graab also joins me, and she is the Executive Director of the SAF Coalition. Let's get to know you just a little bit more in your backgrounds. And Tom, let's start with you.
Sure. So Tom Michaels, I handle government affairs and sustainability and energy policy for United Airlines. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I've been with United about 8 years now, and previously had a long career in the energy sector, working on energy policy from a whole lot of different fronts, but certainly biofuels has been a consistent issue in my life ever since I worked on the renewable fuel standard when I was on Capitol Hill.
Allison, same question to you. If you could just tell us a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lori. I'm Allison Graab. I work at the Alpine Group, and we have the great pleasure of running the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Coalition, the SAF Coalition. And it's a great group. We have more than 50 members representing the entire SAF value chain, all of the airlines. We have airports, SAF producers, oil and gas, OEMs. So really all aspects related to SAF, and our objective is really to promote SAF production in the United States.
And how do you do that, Allison? Let's start talking about what you actually do as a coalition, and then we'll talk about some of the goals as well.
Absolutely. Well, we do a lot of different things, but a large part of our work is focused on federal advocacy for SAF and ensuring that we have the right policies in place to support SAF production in the United States, so that we can really utilize American feedstocks and promote jobs for American farmers and position the U.S., continue to position the U.S. as a leader on SAF, just given the economic and technological competitiveness components of that, and how it supports U.S. economy and jobs and rural America.
Would you say that the U.S. is a leader in SAF right now, in SAF technology?
I'll let Tom field that one if you'd like, Tom.
I think absolutely. The United States had a long head start really globally on biofuels. There's no other country that came close, with the slight exception of Brazil. The United States has been the most innovative and the most competitive space when it comes to alternative fuels. And really, SAF is a new market application for biofuels, right? Rather than putting it in the engine of your car or your truck, you're using those bio-based fuels to power your aircraft. And so you can now fly across the Atlantic or fly across the country, and you're supporting not just your SAF producers, but rural economies.
And if I could just add real quick, Lori, to that, I would say we also view SAF as additive to all of the other biofuels markets. SAF availability in the U.S. rose 157% in 2025, which was 240 million gallons produced in the U.S., but jet fuel use for 2025 was more than 26 billion gallons, and is projected to be more than 31 billion gallons by 2045. So we see this as a market on top of all of the other markets that provides additional opportunities for American agriculture to only increase the market.
What about the infrastructure side of things? Do we have the capacity to go ahead and produce it? Are we already producing it? And then also the planes themselves, are they ready for it?
They are indeed. That's the great thing about SAF, is that you don't need to build new infrastructure, new pipelines, tanks, or aircraft. Our aircraft typically have 20 to 25-year useful life. So when you get a new one, you hold on to it for a while, and you don't want to have to swap out, engines and things like that. That makes it uneconomic to use a different fuel. So that's really why we're so interested in SAF. And fuel is always our, second largest cost after labor. And in rare occasions like today, it might even be exceeding that cost with these sharp increases in fuel prices. But it's times like these where we really see why we've committed so hard to SAF. United first got interested in this space back in 2009 when oil prices went from $50 a barrel to $150 a barrel in less than a year. And so we started thinking over the long term, how do we insulate ourselves and become more resilient against these kinds of shocks? And don't get me wrong, with SAF, you'll see prices go up and down. There'll be volatility in those markets as well, but it will be different kinds of volatility than you see in the oil and gas market. And so we think of it over the long term has potentially a hedge against some of that, and that will help us be more resilient to these sorts of energy crises.
Now, Tom, I don't know very much about the airline industry and how it works, but this question comes to mind as you were talking. So if you fly to another destination overseas on SAF, but that country doesn't have SAF, the airplane can then fly back on traditional fuel? Am I correct?
That's correct. It's always blended actually with traditional fuel.
Okay.
So, once it kind of is blended with conventional fuel, it's jet fuel and chemically indistinguishable from any other. And so there's no issue. Now, how much you blend and things like that can depend on a lot of different factors, but we can get 50% blends.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned that. So all the fuel at this point is blended. What is the holdup? Why are we not getting more of this into the airplanes then, Allison?
It's expensive to produce SAF, and we are getting it into airplanes right now, but we would like to see more of it get into airplanes. And so we really have to signal to SAF producers that we want SAF to be produced and that the cost is worth it and that this country wants to continue to build up the infrastructure for that production.
SAF is a nascent industry, and United has used more of it than virtually any other airline in the U.S. We've been doubling our production year over year for several years now. We've been doubling our consumption, but there aren't many producers of it today, and so you've got sort of scale, you've got cost. And so we're getting really creative in how we surmount those challenges. But in the U.S. this year, about 1% of the fuel used was SAF. And that's not obviously big in proportion to how much jet fuel we use, but it is significant, and it's far more than it was just a few years ago.
So part of the coalition, or I guess as we go back, Allison, when you were talking about the goal, is to continue to develop this out to get more producers, more production of SAF onto the marketplace.
Absolutely. We have SAF producers around the country, and we want to continue to support those producers and also see those folks and others be able to engage in more production.
What are some other things that you're doing to try to increase SAF usage and SAF production?
I'd say one of our focal points is a bill that was introduced in Congress fairly recently called the SAF Act, and that makes some changes to the tax incentive related to SAF, and so that's really our hallmark legislation that we're working on.
Public policy is key here. It really doesn't work without public policy, and just like with the rest of the biofuels industry, whether it be ethanol, biodiesel, or renewable diesel, which are now, mature, profitable industries, but they had decades worth of public policy incentives that helped them get there, and we're going to need that with sustainable aviation fuel.
I'm assuming that you work with other groups like Renewable Fuels Association, Growth Energy, on the same thing.
We do. They are members of our coalition. We love having them as members of our coalition, and it's a great partnership we have with those groups and others.
I think the reason they're involved is they recognize this market opportunity. I mean, United alone uses more than 4 billion gallons of fuel each year, right? Wow. And so if you can make inroads into that market, it's really fantastic. And unlike the rest of the on-road market, which is getting electrified, whether quickly or slowly, that is happening, right? And so we're seeing that demand for gasoline, for example, start to plateau and likely decline, according to most energy experts. We're not going to have that issue in the aviation sector. We're going to use more fuel this year than we did last year, and more fuel last year than we used the year prior. And that trend is expected to continue quite robustly out into the future. And so that's a growth market for today's biofuels producer that we really want to help them access.
Maybe a couple other touch points, especially right now with the conflict on Iran and all the supply chain issues of fuel, that right now more than ever is we need a resource like this. And our government has talked for many years about climate change and cleaning up the climate. Again, this is just an important thing for all of America.
You're 100% right, Lori. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this is sort of what initially sparked our interest. We really do need to have a resilient energy infrastructure in this country. Yeah. And that means, what we're doing now, we're setting up new supply chains, right, that take soybean oil from Illinois, use cooking oil from California, and send them to a facility in Illinois or in California for processing into SAF, and then, delivery into the major airports. And that's going to be a very different supply chain again than jet fuel. Today, 400,000 barrels of jet fuel a day come through. Well, I should say a few weeks ago, 400,000 barrels a day of jet fuel came through the Straits of Hormuz. Today, it's not. And, that's a supply chain that we view as risky, right? And we need to have other plans and other things in the works.
What else would you like to mention here today? Allison, what else have we not touched on that you would like to touch on today?
Thanks for the question. I think, Lori, your questions have been spot on. That really underscores, our message and why this is important.
What else would you like to mention that we haven't hit?
In this crisis, jet fuel has been hit hardest. If you look at the sort of futures for jet fuel, they're substantially higher than those for, say, diesel and gasoline. So for us, again, that underscores the importance. But what I really don't want your listeners to lose sight of is what kind of market opportunity this is for the United States. It's not just domestic demand. Globally, we use 96 billion gallons of jet fuel in 2025. That's expected to grow to 215 billion gallons by 2050. With about 60% of that new demand for jet fuel is coming out of Asia. That's a fantastic export market for our fuel producers and for our agricultural producers. And I think we can lead this, or we can be on the following end. And I think, the United States has a long history of leading on energy. And I think this is just a fantastic opportunity for our growers and our industries here. So we hope that we'll seize both hands.
Yeah, I interview corn growers, sorghum, sunflower, and of course soybean. It's on everybody's radar anyway. We've got an abundance of corn, so I know they're really looking hard to find other uses, and this comes up a whole lot.
This year will be derived from distillers corn oil, which is sort of a byproduct of the ethanol industry, because that's sort of abundantly produced here in the U.S. We're giving uses to what used to be waste products, right? And so that's another exciting opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Ag Queen Podcast with your host, Lori Boyer.